There is a huge global inflation factor hitting the whole world. We cannot escape it. If the world remains highly inflationary, India cannot become an island of stability. So I think the RBI will have to raise interest rates, but it should do so gradually. Some cuts in oil excise duties can be done. And those two put together, we will then say, okay, there is some protection for the poor. So if you want to be greener, you can be greener, but the object of that greenery is to make fuels very, very expensive so that consumption comes down. So you cannot have it both ways. The prices right now are not by any means the peak. The global price is something like $105 per barrel. If this Ukraine war continues, I see the price of oil going up to 110, 115, 120, 130. So, while there is a current problem, this problem is soon going to be overtaken by even worse problems. So all I can say is that, in politics, every party likes to put the blame on the other side. So at this point of time, if both sides actually need to do something, instead of just finger pointing, the center needs to cut duties modestly, not very large. The state governments need to do something similar. And even at the end of it all, you will have to live with higher prices. Let us not pretend that there is something happening which is entirely the fault of either Mr. Modi or the states. The problem is a global one. If the whole globe cannot escape it, India cannot escape it either. All you can do is there can be a palliative. At the end of it all, there will have to be a very large increase in oil prices if the world price goes up to $130 a barrel, which in my view is very likely. So, there is a huge global inflation factor hitting the whole world. We cannot escape it. All that we can say is, how do we adjust? And partly we can adjust, for instance, by some cutting of duties on oil. You can adjust partly by saying, let us continue with free food rations for another 6-8 months. And beyond that, you have to tighten our loins and said, let us hope this particular dreary episode gets over. Let's hope the war in Ukraine comes to some kind of ceasefire or some kind of end. Let the world inflation come down. If the world remains highly inflationary, India cannot become an island of stability. What's very clear is that if you look at the European Central Bank or the Fed, everybody now agrees that those guys loused up. They should have started raising interest rates much earlier. Instead, they first said, oh no, there's a temporary problem caused by COVID. Then there's a temporary problem caused by some supply chain breaking up. And now, this Ukraine war has come. It's very clear that they underestimated the underlying trends. Because even if you strip out food and fuel, the balance of inflation is very high. So those countries are going to be raising interest rates very substantially in the next 12 months. Then the question is, should the Reserve Bank follow suit? I would say within the Indian context, we can afford to worry more about growth than prices. The truth is that we on our own are not going to be able to control prices. The global inflation is going to come in almost regardless of what you do. So it is not the case that by sharply raising Indian interest rates, we will be able to tame Indian inflation when the main problem is a global one. So I think the RBI will have to raise interest rates, but it should do so gradually. And I think the RBI is right to say that on our own, if you just raise interest rates very high, you will squeeze production without solving the problem of imported inflation. If you continue, as I'm proposing, with free food rations, that is a huge gain. There are various studies, including the latest one by Sujit Bhalla, Arvind Nirmani and others, showing that because of the impact of free food, the actual consumption levels, the actual income levels, effective income levels have risen tremendously despite the travails of COVID. So if you are able to meet this basic food requirement of all the poor people, you have already done a huge amount to take care of the fact that other items are going up in price. So I would say that is a very major plus. It has been a very positive in the last 1.5 years, and that should be continued. So that is one of the things that is within our control. So free food can be continued. Some cuts in oil excise duties can be done. And those two put together, we will then say, okay, there is some protection for the poor. Beyond this, we cannot solve the problem of a global storm. But these are necessary steps, and they will be very, very substantially good palliatives. You can say Ukraine war affected oil, or it affected maize or sunflower oil, areas where Ukraine is a very big exporter. But if you look at the world across, the price of cotton, the price of steel, the price of aluminium, the price of plastics, the price of everything is going up. So, I mean, there are people who talk about a multi-commodity cycle, or even something called a Kondratiev cycle. These are long cycles over a very large number of years caused by basic technological change. And there is a case for saying that right now, perhaps we are at the start of one of those cycles. And in one of those cycles, these commodity prices are going to be rising quite substantially for quite some time, regardless of what you do. And one of the reasons, again, would be that the world has underestimated the demand for all these commodities for so long that there has been gross underinvestment. Certainly, there has been such a green outcry against oil and against coal that there has been gross underinvestment in those areas, and the chickens are coming home to roost. So if you want to be greener, you can be greener, but the object of that greenery is to make fuels very, very expensive so that consumption comes down. So you cannot have it both ways. You cannot, on the one hand, say, let me be more green, and let me say, let us have price stability. They contradict each other. So what is happening right now, I think these things will not be solved very easily, because I cannot bring new copper mines or new aluminium mines on stream very, very quickly. Yeah. And with the number of green concerns that we have, the number of years it takes to get a new license is quite substantial. So the producers are unable to react very quickly to shortages. It takes some time. So I regret to say that I fear that this inflation is going to be with us for quite some time, even if COVID doesn't reappear, even if the Ukraine war comes to a reasonably close end. I do not think we are going to be free of inflation.